The year was 1888. London was covered once again by its familiar mist. The streets were filled with the sounds of carriages, footsteps, and distant voices. But inside 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes was facing something far more unusual than any ordinary mystery. He was bored. For a man whose mind was always searching for challenges, peaceful days were difficult to endure. Dr. John Watson, who had returned to visit his old friend, noticed the change immediately. Holmes sat quietly in his chair, surrounded by books and notes, but there was no excitement in his eyes. "You seem unusually quiet, Holmes," Watson said. "My mind is waiting for something interesting," Holmes replied. "An unsolved problem, a mystery, something that requires careful thought." Watson smiled. He knew his friend well. For Sherlock Holmes, a mystery was not a burden. It was a source of energy. At that moment, a visitor arrived at Baker Street. A man wearing an expensive coat entered the room. His appearance suggested wealth and importance, but something about him was hidden. His face was partially covered. His identity was a secret. Holmes watched him carefully. Before the visitor even spoke, Holmes had already begun making observations. The quality of his clothing, the way he moved, the confidence in his voice, the small details that revealed a much larger story. The stranger finally introduced himself. He was a powerful man from the Kingdom of Bohemia, a man whose position required complete secrecy. He had come to Sherlock Holmes because he needed help with a problem that could destroy his future. The problem involved a woman named Irene Adler. Years earlier, the king had known her, and during their relationship, a photograph had been taken, a photograph that could create a terrible scandal. The king was about to enter a marriage that would unite powerful families, but if the photograph became public, everything could collapse. He wanted Holmes to recover it, not through force, not through threats, but through intelligence. Sherlock Holmes listened carefully. A simple photograph. A hidden secret. A powerful man afraid of the truth being revealed. It sounded like an ordinary case, but Holmes soon discovered that this was no ordinary opponent. Irene Adler was not simply a woman with a photograph. She was intelligent, careful, and unlike many people Holmes had encountered before, she knew how to think like him. For the first time, Sherlock Holmes was about to face an opponent who could predict his moves. A woman who would challenge the greatest detective in London. A woman who would earn a place in history. The woman who defeated Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes had faced many difficult opponents before. Criminals who tried to hide their actions. People who believed they were clever enough to escape justice. But this case was different. His opponent was not a criminal hiding in the shadows. She was a woman who understood the importance of information. And information, as Holmes knew very well, could be more powerful than money. Her name was Irene Adler. She was an opera singer known throughout Europe. Beautiful, intelligent, and independent. But what made her truly remarkable was not her fame. It was her ability to stay one step ahead of everyone around her. The King of Bohemia had tried many ways to recover the photograph, but Irene Adler had always been careful. She knew the value of the secret she possessed. Holmes began his investigation quietly. He did not rush. He did not reveal his identity. Instead, he watched, He studied the habits of the woman he was trying to understand, her home, her daily routines, the people around her. Every small detail became a clue. To solve a mystery, Holmes knew that a detective must first understand the person at the center of it. Irene Adler lived in a comfortable home in London. She was not surrounded by guards. She did not appear afraid. In fact, she seemed completely confident. That confidence interested Holmes. Most people with the secret tried to hide, but Irene Adler behaved as if she already knew how to protect herself. Holmes decided to take a different approach. Instead of confronting her, he would observe her. He would become someone she would not recognize. A disguise, a new identity, a carefully planned performance. For Sherlock Holmes, disguises were another tool of investigation. He could change his appearance completely. He could become invisible among ordinary people. And this time, he chose to become someone who could move freely around Irene Adler's home. As the plan began, Watson watched with curiosity. He had seen Holmes transform himself before, but each time was still impressive. The detective who sat beside him moments earlier could become a completely different person. The streets of London became Holmes' stage. Every person he met, every conversation he heard, every movement he noticed, all of it brought him closer to the truth. But Holmes soon realized something important. Irene Adler was not careless. She was not someone who would easily reveal her secrets. She was always alert, always prepared. And somewhere inside her mind, she was already thinking about the possibility that someone might try to trick her. The game had begun, a battle of intelligence between two extraordinary minds, one searching for the truth, the other protecting a secret. And for the first time in a long time, Sherlock Holmes had found someone truly capable of surprising him. Sherlock Holmes continued his careful observation of Irene Adler. Days passed as he studied her movements and searched for any weakness in her defenses. But the more he learned about her, the more impressed he became. She was not careless. She was not easily distracted. Every action she took seemed to have a purpose. Holmes realized that recovering the photograph would require more than simple investigation. He would need a clever plan. A plan that depended not only on his intelligence, but also on his understanding of human nature. One evening, Holmes put his plan into action. He changed his appearance completely. The famous detective of Baker Street disappeared. In his place appeared an ordinary man who would attract no attention. This was one of Holmes' greatest skills. He understood that sometimes the best way to discover the truth was to become invisible. As he moved through the streets of London, he watched the world around him. The city was alive with activity. Carriages passed through the roads. People hurried beneath the gas lamps. And among them walked one of the greatest detectives in history, hidden in plain sight. Holmes reached the area near Irene Adler's home. He waited. He observed. He searched for the perfect moment. Then, something unexpected happened. A sudden event changed the entire situation. A disturbance appeared near the house. People gathered, voices rose, and Holmes found himself in the middle of a situation he had not planned. But this was exactly what made him so successful. He could adapt. He could use unexpected moments to his advantage. During the confusion, Holmes discovered a valuable piece of information. He learned where Irene Adler kept the photograph. The secret he had been searching for was finally within reach. For a moment, it seemed that the case was solved, but Holmes knew better than anyone that a mystery was never finished until the final step. The next morning, he returned with Dr. Watson to complete his plan. Everything depended on speed and precision. They would enter the house, find the photograph, and leave without revealing their true intentions. But there was something Holmes did not know, something that would change everything. Irene Adler had noticed him. She had seen through the disguise. She had understood that someone was watching her, and now the woman who had been hunted was preparing her own move. The greatest detective in London was about to discover that his opponent had been playing the same game, a game of observation, a game of intelligence. A game where the person who understood the other first would win. Sherlock Holmes had entered the world of Irene Adler. But perhaps Irene Adler had already entered the mind of Sherlock Holmes. The next morning arrived quietly over London. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson returned to the streets near Irene Adler's home. Everything appeared normal. The people walked through the city, the carriages moved along the roads, and the morning light slowly covered the houses of London. But behind this ordinary scene was a battle of minds. Holmes had already discovered the location of the photograph. Now he only needed to enter the house and recover the evidence. The plan was simple, but with Irene Adler, nothing was ever truly simple. Holmes knew that one mistake could destroy everything. So he waited for the perfect moment. As they approached the house, Holmes noticed something unusual. There was a feeling that someone was watching, someone who understood the importance of every small detail. But he ignored the feeling. After all, Sherlock Holmes was used to being the observer, not the observed. The plan began. Holmes created a situation that would force Irene Adler to reveal her true intentions. A carefully prepared scene, a moment of confusion, and a clever trick that involved smoke and danger. Suddenly, voices were heard outside. People began to gather. The illusion of a fire spread through the street. Everyone reacted with fear. And Irene Adler reacted exactly as Holmes expected. She did not run toward her valuables. She did not protect her money. Instead, she moved quickly toward the place where the photograph was hidden. For Holmes, that single movement revealed everything. The location of the photograph was no longer a mystery. He had found what he came for. The final piece of the puzzle was in his hands. But there was one problem. Holmes had underestimated the person standing against him. Irene Adler was not just another case. She was not just someone trying to escape a powerful man. She was a woman with intelligence, courage, and extraordinary awareness. While Holmes believed he was uncovering her secrets, Irene had been studying him as well. She had noticed the stranger. She had followed the clues. She had connected the impossible details. And slowly, she discovered the truth. The mysterious man who had entered her world was not an ordinary person. He was Sherlock Holmes, the famous detective from Baker Street, the man who believed he could solve any mystery. But now, for the first time, the mystery was not about someone else. It was about him. Holmes had found the photograph, but Irene Adler had found Sherlock Holmes. And the final move of this remarkable game was about to begin. Sherlock Holmes believed that the hardest part of the case was already behind him. He had found the secret. He had discovered the location of the photograph, and soon he would return with the evidence that the King of Bohemia desperately wanted. But Holmes had made one mistake. He had forgotten one important rule. A great observer must always remember that others can observe too. Irene Adler had been watching. She had noticed the strange events surrounding her home. She had noticed the unusual man who appeared at the right moments. And she had noticed the intelligence behind the disguise. Most people would have seen only a stranger, but Irene was different. She paid attention to details. The way he spoke, the way he moved, the questions he asked, the information he seemed to know. Piece by piece, the truth became clear. The mysterious man was not an ordinary visitor. He was Sherlock Holmes. The moment Irene discovered his identity, she did not panic. She did not run. Instead, she did something Holmes admired more than anything else. She thought. She understood that Holmes was not an enemy who could be defeated by force. He was a man who depended on his mind. So she decided to answer intelligence with intelligence. That same evening, Irene prepared her own plan. She changed her appearance. She left the house quietly. And before disappearing, she made sure that Sherlock Holmes would receive a message that proved she knew everything. The next day, Holmes returned with Dr. Watson. They entered the house carefully. Every step was planned. Every movement was precise. They searched for the photograph. They reached the place where Irene had hidden it. But when they opened the secret location, the photograph was gone. Instead, they found something unexpected. A different picture, and beside it, a letter. Holmes took the letter and read the words written by Irene Adler. She explained that she had discovered his true identity. She explained that she understood why he had come, and most importantly, she assured him that she had no intention of using the photograph against the king. She had taken it only as protection, a guarantee that no one could destroy her future. Holmes stood silently. For perhaps the first time in his career, he had met someone who could match him step for step. Irene Adler had escaped. She had protected herself, and she had done it without hatred or revenge. She had simply played the game better than anyone expected. Dr. Watson watched his friend carefully. He knew Holmes respected intelligence above everything else. And now the great detective had discovered something rare, an opponent who had earned his admiration, a woman who had defeated him, not through strength, not through deception, but through understanding. Sherlock Holmes had solved countless mysteries, but Irene Adler had become the one person he could never forget. The woman who had outsmarted him. The woman who had seen through him. The woman who would forever remain in his memory as the woman. When Sherlock Holmes finished reading Irene Adler's letter, he remained silent for a moment. The case that had seemed so close to victory had ended in a completely unexpected way. The photograph was gone, Irene Adler was gone, and the woman who had been the target of his investigation had managed to escape with complete control over her own destiny. Dr. Watson looked at his friend with curiosity. For many people, this would have been a failure, a lost case, a defeat. But Holmes did not see it that way. He had always respected intelligence. He admired those who could think clearly under pressure. And Irene Adler had proven that she possessed a rare quality. She was not only beautiful, She was not only brave, she was remarkably intelligent. She had understood Holmes' plan. She had discovered his identity. And she had protected herself without causing unnecessary harm. For Sherlock Holmes, that was something worth respecting. The King of Bohemia eventually received the news. The photograph was no longer a threat. Irene Adler had promised not to use it against him. The danger had disappeared. The king was relieved. But Holmes asked for only one thing in return. He wanted no reward. He wanted no payment. Instead, he requested something far more valuable to him, the photograph that Irene Adler had left behind. Not the one that could damage the king, but the one that would remind him of the woman who had challenged his mind. The king agreed, and from that moment, the case became a legend. Years would pass. Sherlock Holmes would face criminals, spies, and impossible mysteries. He would solve cases that seemed beyond human ability. But among all those adventures, one name remained different: Irene Adler. Because she was not remembered as a criminal, she was not remembered as a victim, she was remembered as the one person who had defeated Sherlock Holmes at his own game. A game of observation, a game of intelligence, a battle where the sharpest mind would win. But in the end, there was no true loser. Holmes had gained something more valuable than victory. He had found someone he could respect, someone whose intelligence matched his own, someone who proved that even the greatest detective in the world could still be surprised. And from that day forward, whenever Sherlock Holmes thought of Irene Adler, he did not remember the case he failed to solve. He remembered the woman who showed him that mystery could exist even in the mind of another person. The woman who escaped his investigation. The woman who earned his admiration. The woman who remained forever known as the woman.